Dutch Language Institute, and I will be moderating this session. For this panel session in the online medium, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, you should see this Google presentation now. Okay, yeah, these are papers in the session. And yeah, for this online panel session, I would like to propose the following structure. The idea was that you have all already watched the pre-recorded presentations for this session so that we can have lively discussion in the next 45 minutes. I will assume that this is the case, but to refresh your memories, and because it's Monday morning, I would like to start with a short introduction of up to 2 minutes in which the authors introduce their paper. Then there will be a possibility for questions between panelists, and then finally we will take questions from the audience. And if you have urgent questions, please do put them in the chat, and then yeah, the person who's moderating the chat will interrupt and ask the question if it's an urgent question, and otherwise it will be addressed later during the panel session. So then it's time to start with the short introductions, and the first paper is titled Variation in Idioms Dictionaries, Lexicographers Work in the Post-Editing Era, and this paper will be introduced by Jelena Parizoska from the University of Zagreb. Jelena, are you here?
I'm here, hello.
Hi, yes, okay, yeah, I will do the slides and you do the talking.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jelena Parizoska, and my colleague Ivana Filipović Petrović is also here. Okay, here is the short introduction to our paper. The aim is to highlight 3 practical issues of post-editing work involved in the lexicographic treatment of idiom variation. 1, finding all the conventionalized forms of an idiom in a corpus and identifying the most common one. 2, distinguishing conventionalized variations from modifications, i.e. creative use. And 3, finding the most common patterns of modification for individual expressions. Entries in the online dictionary of creation idioms, which is still under development, are used as examples. This dictionary is based on the creation web corpus searched using the sketch engine. So in order to find all the conventionalized forms of an idiom, which is task 1, fairly general queries are conducted. We search for a single highly salient idiomatic component or 2 core constituents relatively close together. When it comes to the second task, determining creative use, constructions which occur fewer than 5 times in the corpus are treated as modifications. And the third task, if corpus data shows that an idiom is prone to deliberate changes, then more precisely framed queries are conducted to identify patterns of modification. Those tasks have several important implications. So in the online dictionary of creation idioms, items with common lexes which have different grammatical forms are listed in a single entry, with a head word being the most frequent form of an idiom. Modifications are included in special boxes at the end of some entries because speakers often deliberately change the given idiom's lexis and or structure. Moreover, since modifications display some regularity, then feature boxes show the specific ways in which speakers deliberately change idioms. So we have this little explanation. Overall, post-editing work in idioms dictionaries involves tasks that enable lexicographers to create dictionary entries which show users 2 key elements about idiom variation. 1, idioms have 2 or more conventionalized forms, and 2, speakers exploit idioms according to specific patterns. So that was our introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jelena. Then we go to the next paper. The next paper is Encoding Semantic Phenomena in Verb-argument Combinations. And yes, Professor Jezek made it in time, being stuck on the train. So
yes, yes, I made it. Thank you very much.
So please,
yes.
yeah.
Yes, thank you. And so we are 3 authors, myself, and then Costanza Marini and Emma Romani, who are also present today. And we report some work that we have been doing to encode the semantics of arguments in a pattern dictionary of Italian verbs. So as is stated in the slide, we report the classification that we adopted in the 2 electronic dictionaries of corpus-derived verbal patterns. So we have TPAS for Italian and Croatipas for Italian. They are both based on the corpus pattern analysis methodology that was first introduced by Patrick Hanks. And we adopted a classification to account for the three different semantic phenomena that we assume that take place between noun and verbs within a valency structure context. The 3 phenomena are semantic type alternation, semantic type shift, and complex type exploitation. So we have here an example of semantic type alternation. This is the verb rimuovere in Italian, so in the TPAS resource. And we can see that in the subject position, we can have 2 different semantic types for the subject, human or wind, depending on the context. You see the context below from the corpus that we use to derive the predicate argument structures. And these 2 types do not have, apparently do not have anything in common from a semantic point of view. Next slide. Yes. A case of semantic type shift is when we have metonymies introduced by the selectional requirements of the verb. For instance, we can read a document, or we can read Harry Potter, Dante, Moravia, Calvino, and of course this is a shift in semantic type, and we encode this shift in a sub-pattern, as you can see here in the slide 2M. M stands for metonymical, where we want to show that a shift has taken place from the, let's say, original semantic type to a shift of type in context, in this case, human. And last phenomenon is the case of what we assume are complex types, such as institution. We assume that institution is a complex type made of 2 components, an abstract component and a human group component. In this case, institution accepts human. We have the human group component that is activated in the context of use, as in the example that we see below. Not all universities accepted women, and the University of Warsaw was one of them. Instead, in the next slide, thank you, we see that with the verb dissolvere, dissolve, used in its figurative use, institution in the object slot is intended as an abstract entity, because in this case, a barbaric invasion tore apart the empire, for instance. Empire stands for the institution, and institution doesn't stand here for a human group, but abstract entities. So, next slide, please. If there is one, I think so. Yes, no, oh, that was our last one. Anyway, so these are the 3 phenomena that we are exploring in our paper and in our work, and we will be happy to give more information when there are questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elisabetta. Okay, then the next paper is entitled A Cognitive Perspective on the Representation of Multiword Expressions in Electronic Learners Dictionaries. This paper is presented by Thomai Dalpanagioti from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in Greece. I apologize if I don't pronounce all your surnames correctly, because multi-word expressions are complex, but your surnames are also.
Yes. So. Thank you very much. It's fine. Good morning from Thessaloniki, Greece. Let me present my study. My aim is to show how cognitive semantic theories can help improve the treatment of multi-word expressions in electronic dictionaries. My study has two parts. First, I examine the representation of different types of multi-word expressions in online English monolingual learners dictionaries, and I point out the need for a more rational, motivated, and systematic lexicographic treatment. Then I argue for a cognitively oriented approach to multi-word expressions that draws on frame semantics and the conceptual metaphor and metonymy theory. The proposal is illustrated through two case studies, which demonstrate how Carole and Dash multi-word expressions are integrated in a motivated semantic network. In the next slide, you can see the general tendency observed in the so-called Big Five monolingual learners dictionaries, which is to present multi-word expressions separately from the main entry in separate hyperlinked entries or in separate boxes in the entry, and even when they appear among numbered senses, there is no indication of their relation. In the next slide, you can see part of my pre-lexicographic database entries. You can see the motivation of different types of multi-word expressions and their link to the rest of the lexical units. In the case studies, we find examples of collocations, idioms, situational formulas, and phrasal verbs, and therefore we demonstrate the applicability of the combination of cognitive semantic theories to establish single word and multi-word lexical units and link them together. This frame and motivation related information can be translated into dictionary features such as frame-based signposts, tiered structure, points of factors through menus and related sentence divisions, clues and definitions, and awareness-raising notes. The same things are evident in the next slide on Dash. So on the whole, I think that in post-editing lexicography, where lexicographically relevant information can be automatically extracted from corpora and drafted in preliminary entries, we should spend time and effort in organizing single word and multi-word lexical units in a coherent and principled manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then we go to the next presentation, which is on multiword-term bracketing and representation in terminological knowledge bases. And this paper will be introduced today by Pilar León. I skipped the last part of your surname. Sorry.
It's okay. Pilar León-Araúz.
Yeah.
So this is Pilar and my colleague Melania Cabezas. Okay, so in the first slide, I will tell you about what we're currently doing with multi-word terms in our team, in the ecolexicon knowledge base. Multi-word terms are structurally and semantically complex and are not usually well described or accurately described in terminological knowledge bases. We believe that in any knowledge-based resource, an accurate description of these kind of terms entails making bracketing or structural disambiguation explicit. Why? Because, for example, if we take a multi-word term such as reactive power consumption, if we interpret the left bracketing, we will get to the equivalent consumo de potencia reactiva in Spanish instead of the wrong correspondences, consumo energético reactivo or consumo reactivo energético, if we interpret it as a right bracketing. This is just an example of how performing structural disambiguation at the very beginning can help both terminologists and translators to establish equivalence. So the paper is divided into two parts. First of all, we developed a bracketing protocol based on different bracketing rules based at the same time on usual bracketing models in the literature. And then we propose a way of representing multi-word terms in terminological knowledge bases. So we defined 16 bracketing rules based on these bracketing models. We performed 34 different corpus queries in 2 different corpora, specialized somehow short corpus and specialized but not specialized on wind power and very large corpus. And these queries were sent through the Sketch Engine's API. And then we validated the protocol, and then we decided on how to represent these multi-word terms in Ecolexicon, our knowledge base. So yeah, in the next slide, please. This is only an example of how the queries and rules are computed for one of the bracketing models at adjacency, which is one of the most precise models. So we first compare the number of occurrences of offshore wind and wind turbine, and compare the amount of occurrences, and then if offshore wind is more frequent than wind turbine, then we derive that, we conclude that the bracketing is on the left. This is just an example. So in the next slide, we can see how the results of each bracketing rule and also compare to different corpora. In the graphic on the left, we see how the most useful and productive rules were those of adjacency, dependency, and longer multi-word terms, and how in the wind power corpus, most of the rules were more precise. In the Doage corpus, the more precise rules were those based on surface patterns, which is natural since a bigger corpus can provide more results. This means that in the wind power corpus, sometimes we didn't get any results. So that's why we get the second graphic, where we see that if we don't take into account the non-available results, then the reliability of each rule is reframed in this way, which means that in the wind power corpus, we get better results, even though sometimes we don't get any results, okay? Only the abbreviations, brackets, and prepositional paraphrases were more reliable in the larger corpus. So domain specificity seems to be a better factor than than corpus size. And finally, in the next slide, we just make a proposal that we are not going to, I'm not going to elaborate a lot because it is in the paper. And you can see how we envisage the construction of a multi-word term description module in Ecolexicon. This is the summarized view. And if you have any questions, we will come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Pilar. Then the final paper in this session, Corpus-based methodology for an online multilingual collocations dictionary first steps. And this paper will be introduced by Adriana Orenha-Ottaiano. I believe, is she, are you here?
Oh, okay, yes, I am. Yeah, no problems with the video. Okay, good morning. I'm Adriana Orenha-Ottaiano, and these are our research partners. In our project, we have the purpose of developing a phraseographical methodology and model for a corpus-based online multilingual collocations dictionary that we call PLATCOL in English, Portuguese, French, Spanish, and Chinese. For this presentation, we aim to describe the first steps. So we highlight this. These are the first steps of this methodology. So our methodology is based on the onomatic approach described in Garcia et al. 2019, and our corpora were automatically compiled the 5 languages of our research. So bases on collocations were automatically extracted and validated. We compute association measures like T-score, Z-score, DICE, and we also rely on automatic extraction of examples and automatic translation. So regarding PLATCOL's microstructure and design, our proposal is in line with the functional theory of lexicography proposed by Fortes Oliveira in TARP 2014 and TARP 2015. And next slide, please. Okay, this is a prototype of our platform. So without having to sign in, users will have access to PLATCOL's basic microstructure dictionaries. As I said, this is just a prototype because we have already developed the dictionary writing system, but we are still developing the end user system. So if users want to have access to more information, they have to sign in. So they have advanced options, so they can choose to have collocations, frequency, statistics, etc. And they can also have the opportunity to see the translation equivalents of the sought entry or collocations. As you can see, that's the right slide. So it's important to highlight this is an ongoing project. So some methodological aspects, as well as microstructural decisions, may still be changed or reshaped to be just best adjusted to the dictionary, to the new languages and users' different lexicographical needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrienne, for introducing the paper. And yeah, now it's time. I don't know if there are any really urgent questions in the chat that can't wait. Then we can take maybe one or two. Otherwise, I would suggest we continue with the questions within the panel. I have received questions from each of you, and I've given one question to each paper, and this is basically yet to start up the discussion after this part of the session. So the first question is for the first paper on variation in idioms dictionaries, and the question is, as Jelena just described, there's a cutoff of 5 for creative users. Is there also a cutoff threshold to include variations in a dictionary? So.
Okay, thank you for your question. Yes, there is a cutoff threshold, but it depends on 2 factors. One is type of variation, and the second one is number of, excuse me, number of items. So when I say type of variation, what I mean is it depends on whether it's lexical substitution or, let's say, lexicogrammatical changes. So I'll give an example. When it comes to lexical substitution, and it's usually verbs that vary widely. If the verb varies widely and there are 4 or more verbs in the same idiom, then typically the cutoff point is 3. But what we need to notice is that idioms usually have Zipf-ian distributions, I mean variant forms. There is an example in the Herba corpus of greet someone with open arms. So we've got, I think, 7, sweep something under the carpet. We've got 7 or 8 verbs, but then we decided to list only the 3 most frequent verbs because they have the highest frequencies, but they have Zipf-ian distributions, meaning 800, 300, and 140 tokens. So we did not list the other 4 that have less than 100 tokens. However, in this particular case, being a corner, this is where variations are lexicogrammatical constructions. So we feel that we need to show users that the same situation can be described from different perspectives. And in such cases, we include all the variations because, like I said, users need to know that. And again, when it comes to other types of variations, such as, I don't know, a verb phrase and a noun phrase, like to stab in the back and a stab in the back, even though the difference in frequencies might be large, we still include the much less frequent variant, again, to show users that, for instance, the idiom can describe the entire process, the entire event, or just a participant of the event, like a stab in the back.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a clear answer. I don't know if, the group from Elisabetta, Jezek wants to follow up on the question, or whether it was clear for you as well.
That was clear. Came from us.
Okay.
Thank you for the answer.
Yes. Okay. So then the next question is for your group. Yeah. The clarification question: are predicate argument structures and semantic types based on Pustiovskis and Hanks, or are they adapted according to your needs?
Okay. This is a question. This is a very good theoretical question, of course. And I must refer to some work that Pustiovsky and Hanks have been doing together, which is actually, which has also inspired our work. This is a contribution of 2005 where they have proposed actually to use semantic types that were developed within generative lexicon theory, together with corpus pattern analysis to characterize the semantics of English verbs. So we actually took inspiration from this work, as I also mentioned in the short presentation. However, we must say that in analyzing verbs, we started with a list that was used in the English research, but with analyzing Italian and Croatian verbs, we needed to add some semantic type that were missing in the original list that we used, because verbs called for new semantic types. Their semantic restrictions were not represented by the times we originally had. So I mean, this is not in the question now, but I can say that now we have about 180 types for the semantic selections that we have identified in the procedure. So I hope this is clear, and maybe Costanza or Emma want to add something if there's time.
You want to add something, Costanza? Or?
No. I just want to add that for now, the Italian and the Croatian projects share the same system of semantic types. So the Croatian resource is way smaller than the Italian one, but theoretically speaking, if there will be verbs that call for adding new semantic types, it could be the case. But for now, we share the same system.
Okay, thanks for adding this information and for answering this question. Then the next question also relates, is a clarification question relating also to semantics. Which inventory of clusters of senses was used, or did you use, Thomai, in your work?
Yes, thank you for the question. The clusters of senses are also based on FrameNet frames. So lexical units are based on FrameNet frames, but also use the same inventory of frames for assigning them to general clusters. So for example, in the particular case you can see here with motion, in FrameNet inventory, you can see that there is a general motion frame, and which is inherited by the self-motion frame. It is used by the departing frame. So this is the link. However, we can see that the text creation, for example, frame is not related to departing frame in FrameNet, because here we have a metaphorical relation, and the metaphorical relations have not been annotated in FrameNet. The same is true with the impact. So impact, the relation is annotated in FrameNet. However, the destroying frame is not linked to the cause impact frame in FrameNet, but because it's a metaphorical relation here as well, but it can be a contribution, a slight contribution maybe.
Thank you. I think this is clear. The next question for paper by Pilar León-Araúz, Melania, Cabezas, and Pamela Farber, again related to semantics. In your semantic combinations, you use some, I'm not quite sure what to call them, categorizations or attributes. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on where they come from, which inventory you use.
Yes, thank you. Well, the theoretical framework on which we base this work is frame-based terminology, which is mostly based on frame semantics, and thus focuses on the semantic relations between concepts in a specialized subject field, in this case, the wind power. So we focus especially on semantic categories, because they represented how the concepts are related within a multi-word term, the concepts that are present in the specialized subject field. We also focused on the semantic relations that construct the knowledge in this domain, and also on the semantic roles that represent how the arguments of the conceptual propositions that underlie multi-word terms are related between each other. And so these different types of semantic annotation are mostly based on the frame-based terminology approach.
Okay, clear. Thank you very much for clarifying. And then the last question is for the paper presented by Adriaan. And that question is, does the online multilingual collocations dictionary have a receptive or productive orientation, or both? And how do you cater for the user's productive needs? Adriaan?
I'm sorry. So thank you very much for the questions. So considering that collocations do not usually pose a lot of problems regarding comprehension, they are usually more transparent. Platco has a productive orientation. So the idea is that it will help users produce more authentic texts, especially to some of our target audiences, language learners, pre and in-service teachers, learning and professional translators. And it also has the purpose of developing users' collocational competence. So the wider the repertoire of collocations, the greater fluency a learner can achieve. So as the platform is intended to have an easy layout, also with the possibility of being customized, we believe that it may also encourage production. Regarding features, cater for users' needs. Well, we haven't carried out an empirical study about this. We started from our experience with our students and what was reported in works that took this issue into account. And specifically about our proposal, we want to improve access to collocations and to facilitate the allocation so they can search for the base or for the collocate. They can have access to more systematic information on the use of this unit. And consider that it's a multilingual collocations dictionary for translators. We meet their production needs when we, for example, offer them access to find equivalents in different languages. So they may know the equivalent, but they may not know the right collocates. So, for example, if they need to translate the collocation, develop a plan in English into Spanish, so they can choose the base plan in Spanish, and then can find the equivalent collocate desarrollar, for example. Or they can also find equivalent collocates in Spanish, Portuguese, or any other language. And so they can also use different ways of searching for an equivalent, either from the base or from the collocation itself. So I think that we acknowledge the useful role of collocations in dictionaries as well, and in raising awareness of collocations, and we recognize them as valuable pedagogical tools to stimulate or boost production. And by the way, besides that, as we're talking about customization, we believe that a clearer and an eye-catching structure for the entries with a neat and uncluttered page layout may also help users to boost production.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we have got about 11 minutes left in this session. So, and I've seen there's quite a lot of action in the chat. I don't know if Istok has some questions that, because now it's time for questions from the audience. Oh yes, I would like to say I did receive more questions from the panelists about the other papers. I will put all these questions in the next Meet discussion so that, yeah, you can answer the questions there. And that will also be for all the questions that are in the chat and that we won't have time to answer during the session. They will all be put in the next Meet and can be further discussed there. So Istok, are there any questions?
Yes, we just got a couple of long ones. And well, I'll start with the top one from Jelena. So question one is, based on your experience, what could be possible developments in terms of corpus analysis tools to facilitate data acquisition? I think this is a question that any panelist can answer if they want. So I think it's addressed to the entire panel.
Yes, this seems a general question, so I don't know who wants to answer. Maybe there is still a difference between terminological multi-word expressions and idioms, but yes.
Maybe I can just give an input to that, if possible. Yes? Yes, please. Yes, because for instance, in the work we do, we did try to do some, because we, in order to identify the predicate argument structure, we basically manually cluster a number of corpus concordances to identify the selection restriction of the verb. And we did try to carry out some experiments in doing some automatic clustering. However, so far the results have not been as good as we wanted, because we are in fact producing a research which is supposed to be a gold standard. So we are also, we are also careful in introducing data which we think are not reaching that gold standard level. So it's a bit complicated. It's good to experiment on, but possibly up to now, we see that it's a bit complicated to be able to directly include some automatically obtained data in the research itself. I hope this kind of answers part of your question.
Does one of the other panelists want to?
Can I add one bit?
Yes, please.
When it comes to idioms, I think we have the same issue with automatic extraction, and that is the issue with idioms is variation again. Or if, in our case, if you want to include creative use, then I'm afraid right now, the only way to do it is by looking at concordances and actually manually sorting the results and using your linguistic knowledge in order to determine, what is creative use in particular. I know that there have been some developments when it comes to automatic extraction of idioms. So in Slovenia, our colleagues are using mice, if I'm not mistaken. But like I said, so far in our experience, the only way to do it right now is manually sort the examples manually and look at the examples. Thank you.
Shall we go to the next question, or is anyone?
I can see Anna Frankenberg raised her hand.
Okay. Or
Hi. Thank you. Yeah, I have a question for the last presentation, Adriani. I was wondering, because now neuro machine translation and even phrase-based machine translation can give some very good collocation translations, because machine translation is not translating word for word anymore. So wouldn't it be simpler for a language learner? I mean, that's what I find my students do anyway. They just, write the collocation or the sentence in Google Translate, and usually they get a good range of collocation translations. So my question is, are you using machine translation to check or to, in your methodology, or to cross-reference what you're doing with corpus? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for your question. Well, in fact, we rely on automatic translation first, and then we are manually validating the translations. Well, that's the phase we're going now, the second semester. So we have already extracted collocations automatically. We are analyzing. So it varies per languages because we have different people responsible for each language. So now it's this, as I said, it's the following phase. We are going to manually analyze them. And in case they are not suitable for the the collocations, we have a team. I mean, the whole team of lexicographers and some of our masters and PhD students are helping us in order to propose another translation if they're not suitable. In terms of, I don't know if that was also your question. So I've been teaching translators for over 18 years, 7 years in a private university and 11 years at São Paulo State University. So even though they may count on different sources, so they still believe that they need a dictionary to help them. So I've already talked to all of them, and a PhD student of mine, we carry out a research in the second semester. I mean, we'll start carrying out a research in the second semester to assess their needs, etc. To have, I mean, as I said, a research to prove that our assumptions were right, our hypotheses were right. I don't know if I answered your question. Thank you. Okay.
I think this partly answered Tracy Arts' question, so we can move to the one by Olga Babina. It's a question for Elisabetta. So what corpora are used in the concordances? Are they uploaded to the tool, and whether you may experiment with different corpora?
Yes, I did a quick chat as I didn't know if there was time, but no, we use one corpus. We use ITWAC, which is a web corpus uploaded in the Sketch engine for the Italian resource. And for creation, we use a corpus that was built also from the web within the 1010 family corpora in Sketch engine. So we didn't experiment on different corpora up to now.
Okay.
Questions in the chat?
Well, now I have to scroll down the chat because the panelists are answering in the chat. So
okay, yeah. The chat will also be saved. So all questions and answers will be kept, and yeah, we will order them. And
I'm sorry, we were not supposed to enter in the chat.
No, you can answer in the chat.
Yes, you can answer the chat as well, but
yeah.
It's just
questions that we don't have time to answer, we will put them in the next meet.
Yes,
and then
yes.
You can answer them there. But yeah, no, it's logical
right.
that you try to answer them here.
Thank you.
Well, we've only got 2 minutes left, so I don't know if there's one last question. Because, well, I saw a lot of, yeah, a lot going on in the chat, so there's definitely we can discuss for much longer. I have a few more interesting questions. But
I think we have a question for, no. I think all of the questions have been answered. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but so we might have a time for one more live question.
Okay.
If there's if there's still a participant.
Is there anyone who has a live question? Otherwise, I have a nice question which also forms a nice rich session on pedagogical lexicography tomorrow. If there's no, then I would like to raise this question: the relation between multi-word expressions and the CEFR levels. It was mentioned in the paper by Adriana. Yeah, so what's your opinion on including this information in your resources? So we only got 1 minute, so I'm afraid we can't all answer, but
okay, that's a very difficult question. We try to approach that in our paper. So we mentioned that we stand for the relevance of collocations for all levels, and therefore the dictionary should include collocations for all CFR levels. So we, regarding CFR descriptors, for example, we may consider relating collocations as a whole to each level. So the point is that we would have to consider already published documents based on the CFR in the different languages we are working with. For example, in Spanish, we have the plan curricular, and we would have to check which collocations are suggested for each level. So however, there are no such documents for all languages, and we have to develop different approaches for each language. So the idea of including information on CFR levels has already been thought of, as I just said. However, as we also claim in our paper, the fact of dealing with many languages and language equivalents, that's the biggest problem. It is a challenging task. And we regard it as a research to be carried out in the near future, after this 2-year phase of the project ends. So we believe that we may do that in the near future, right? So it is obviously a highly important issue and extremely relevant for users. That would be wonderful if we could have that. But there are so many issues that we still have to consider until the end of the project. So we don't know if we have time for that. Let's hope we do, but I'm not sure. Maybe for the second phase, for sure. That's an important issue. Thanks for the question.
Well, thank you for your answer, and I'm sure that someone else would like to, love to answer as well, but we have run over already. It's 11:01, and so I suggest that this may be a nice question to take up again, maybe tomorrow during the session on pedagogical lexicography. There's not just a question, I think, about including information on this level in the resources, but also it may have an impact on the corpora that we use, or to support our resources. But that's for discussion for tomorrow. So I would like to thank all panelists now for this session. Thank you for your contribution. And then we have a 15-minute break again.